Earth had reached its final boss, the Frost Queen. At the center of that frozen battlefield, one player still moved forward. Junho was one of the last 5 players standing against her. The battle pushed him past every limit, through spell after spell, strike after strike. In the end, he barely succeeded in killing the Frost Queen. Victory came with a price. His body was sealed in hibernation until he could fully absorb her nucleus. As a result, he was cryogenically frozen for a long time. 25 years passed. When he finally woke, the hardest sight waiting for him was not the cold, but his comrades still trapped in ice. Then the system confirmed it. He possessed frost, and the seal of frost could be removed. The only way to save them was the very ability he gained after defeating the queen. That ability was Frost, ranked EX, but the world had not become peaceful. Monsters still existed inside the gates. There were fiends who threatened his life, and disasters waiting beyond ordinary battlefields. New dangers watched from the dark. Even newly appeared boss monsters stood between him and the future he wanted back. To regain his lost stats, Junho would have to fight again, cutting through enemies one battle at a time. His status window showed the truth. He was starting over, but not from nothing. His goal was simple: save his comrades from the ice prison that had held them for decades. That was why he stepped forward, leaving the past behind him. He abandoned the name Specter, a name that had already become a legend. And once again, he headed toward the gates. This time, he would return as the brand new player, Junho. Before the legend became history, Junho stood inside the Frost Queen's frozen nest. The Frost Queen looked down on him, as if the battle had already ended. Junho was wounded and exhausted, but his resolve had not broken. She mocked his hope, certain that his friends were already doomed. Her words were meant to freeze more than his body. They were meant to freeze his will. Junho cut through the taunt with a single answer. He had no time for despair. There was only one thing left to do: end the nightmare in front of him. The queen heard his answer clearly. He had come to kill her. Then he moved, crossing the battlefield before fear could catch up. The frozen nest erupted as blade and magic rushed toward the same point. The Frost Queen answered with overwhelming power, filling the arena with white light. Junho forced his way through the storm, dodging and striking while the ice closed around him. Every exchange carried the weight of humanity's last chance. The queen refused to fall, turning the arena itself into a weapon. But Junho kept pressing forward, even as each attack threatened to bury him. At close range, survival came down to instinct, timing, and one final opening. He found that opening and poured everything he had into a finishing assault. For a moment, the frozen battlefield became silent. The Frost Queen admitted the fight had been entertaining. Junho could not say the same. With that last exchange, the queen's reign finally broke. Victory did not bring relief. Something inside the queen began flowing into him. The system recognized the process as absorption, and Junho's body began to change. The power was too much to contain, and Frost began locking him in place. 76 hours earlier, the final dungeon expedition had reached the staircase to the queen. The rule was brutal. Only one player could climb those stairs. Kali could not accept it. Sending one person alone sounded like a death sentence. Skaya gave the answer no one wanted to say. Specter was the best choice. Junho listened in silence while his friends weighed his life against the world's future. One by one, they reached the same conclusion. Against an enemy built around ice, most of the team would be fighting at a fatal disadvantage. Kali hated the logic because she knew it was correct. The mission narrowed to one person, and that person was Junho. Even then, they gave him one last chance to step back. Junho understood the risk, including the possibility that regret would be all that remained. In the end, they trusted him with the fight that none of them could share. That trust stayed with him as he walked toward the queen alone. His friends believed their sacrifice would not be wasted. They believed that if anyone could do it, Specter could. Belief did not make the burden lighter. Junho still carried the apology in his heart. 25 years later, the battle had become public history. People gathered to hear how a monster once froze the Pacific and pushed humanity into despair. The story became the story of 5 heroes who carried hope to Antarctica. Even children knew the name of the attack team that entered the final nest. The presenter built the moment carefully, turning history into performance. With a snap, the exhibit moved from story to proof. There they were, the 5 heroes preserved as ice statues before the audience. The crowd was asked to show respect to the people who made safe zones possible. Then someone noticed what should have been impossible. One of the statues moved. The presenter tried to dismiss it, insisting the reinforced glass chamber was perfectly controlled. She smiled through the warning, unaware that the seal had already started to fail. A sound behind her broke that confidence. Inside the ice, Junho's body was waking after decades of silence. The frozen shell shattered, and the legend inside it came back to life. Junho crashed out of the exhibit before anyone could understand what they were seeing. The system completed the absorption at last. He returned to consciousness on his knees, weak, freezing, and surrounded by strangers. The system offered congratulations, as if 25 lost years were just another reward screen. The first thing Junho felt was cold. The Frost Queen's nucleus had been fully absorbed into him. With it came a new skill, Frost ranked EX. Around him, the museum erupted into panic as a legend opened his eyes in the modern world. Junho had defeated the final boss, but now he had to face the world that moved on without him. Seo Junho wakes to a world that kept moving without him. His body is weak from the ice, and even his hand trembles when he tries to move. The doctors are careful around him, but Junho only wants one thing: to know who is coming to see him and whether this new world still remembers Specter. Looking out over modern Seoul, Junho realizes the peaceful future he fought for actually arrived. So he removes the mask, because this world may not need heroes the way it once did. Then an old friend storms in and breaks the tension. Deok-gu recognizes him instantly, jokes like no time has passed, and proves that at least one bond survived the 25 years. Deok-gu explains why everyone is shaken. When the Frost Queen fell, the world celebrated, but the victory opened the frontier and revealed that the Queen was only the beginning. Players gathered, crossed into the frontier, and found new lands, magic, monsters, and resources. But without Junho's original party, humanity's pace slowed to almost nothing. Junho expects decades of progress. Instead, he learns humanity has only pushed a few floors forward, and the answer hits him harder than any wound from the past. The reason is worse than incompetence. The Frost Queen's nucleus was needed for the next breakthrough, but no one could find it, no matter how many times they searched her nest. Junho knows exactly where it went. He absorbed the nucleus himself, but he swallows that truth and lets Deok-gu believe it was just bad luck. The reunion turns awkward as Junho weighs when to confess. For now, he says he wants to go down to the lower floor first, and Deok-gu tells him to come back afterward. Junho goes to the memorial instead. The place is quiet, preserved, and heavy with everything his frozen years stole from him. He apologizes to his old comrades for being late, tells them the world became better, and finally lets himself sit with the grief he never had time to feel. As he drinks in their memory, something changes. Beneath the dust and silence, his status begins to respond. A system message appears. The seal on his ice stat can be removed. Junho is stunned because the power he thought was locked away may be coming back. The message changes everything. If Junho can break the seal on his ice power, then saving his frozen comrades is no longer just a wish. His new frost skill is beyond the old ranking system, but his magic stat is still too low. The path is clear. Climb again, recover his strength, and melt the ice one step at a time. Junho promises his party he will come back for them. Then the story returns to the hospital, where his old friend Deok-gu is still trying to keep him out of trouble. Junho says he wants to become a player again, but Deok-gu pushes back. 25 years ago, Junho wanted retirement. Now the world he woke up in is far more dangerous. Deok-gu explains the new threat: fiends, awakened people who use their powers for crime and terrorism. Without Specter around, the people who hated him have only grown louder. For Deok-gu, the safest answer is simple: throw away the Specter name and live as Seo Junho. But Junho is already focused on the second floor and the lava zone no one can clear. Junho reveals that he knows a way through. Deok-gu thinks he means the missing Frost Queen nucleus, and Junho finally admits the ridiculous truth: he absorbed it himself. Deok-gu nearly loses his mind, but the accident created exactly what humanity needs. Junho now carries the Frost Queen's power, and that may be enough to deal with the second floor. That settles the real reason for his return. Junho is not chasing fame. He is going back into the tower because the only road to his comrades runs through it. There is one practical problem left. He needs a player license. Deok-gu explains that the big guilds watch the public licensing exam now, searching for talent they can recruit. Junho understands the opportunity immediately. If he dominates the exam, every guild will want him, and Deok-gu will have a public reason to support him without exposing Specter. Junho arrives at the player licensing exam, the first public step toward returning to the tower without revealing the Specter name. He watches the first applicant enter a simulated combat test. The exam looks casual from the outside, but it is designed to expose anyone who lacks real survival instincts. The applicant fights with spirit, but no discipline. Junho sees every mistake immediately, and the examiners reject him before the test can drag on. Then Junho walks in with a full spread of weapons. To the observers, he looks like another Specter imitator trying too hard to stand out. Junho is not showing off for attention. He is testing how far his weakened body can go and how much of his old battle sense still remains. The monsters charge, and the difference becomes obvious. Junho moves like someone who has survived real battlefields, not a beginner taking an exam. Every weapon has a purpose. Spear, knives, bow, and blade all flow together as he clears the room with calm efficiency. The last enemy falls, and Junho passes. The victory is clean, but it also reminds him that his body still hurts after a fight that should have been easy. The examiners are stunned. His only listed skill is low-ranked weapon proficiency, yet his execution is too polished to dismiss as imitation. That is exactly what Deok-gu needs. With the exam result, Junho now has a clean public identity, a player license, and a reason for every guild to start watching him. After the licensing exam, Junho is already being treated like a strange new celebrity. But behind closed doors, he is not interested in fame. He asks Deok-gu for information on uncleared gates. Deok-gu realizes what Junho is planning and warns him immediately. Restricted area gates are the places where even veteran players disappear without leaving bodies behind. Junho hears the danger and refuses to back down. His frozen comrades are still waiting, and every day he spends resting is another day they remain trapped. There is another reason he cannot wait. Now that he has returned as a player, the fiends will eventually come for him, and he needs strength before that happens. Deok-gu searches for something that will not instantly kill him. The only gate that fits Junho's current level is Curse of Dawn, a level 1 restricted gate that has defeated every challenger for 7 years. Before he leaves, Deok-gu handles the practical side: housing, contracts, and gear. Junho receives light armor made by Kwon Noya, a legendary craftsman from the old days. Junho wants to thank Noya in person, but Deok-gu stops him. Fiends are watching the workshop, and one careless visit could expose both Junho and the people helping him. So Junho accepts the delay and prepares instead. His body is still weak from the exam, but he gives himself only 10 days to recover before entering the gate. 10 days later, Junho stands before Curse of Dawn. The first real step toward restoring his power begins here. Junho steps into Curse of Dawn expecting a brutal, restricted gate, but the first thing he feels is not fear. The place is strangely calm, almost warm, as if the trap is trying to lower his guard. The reports make the goal sound simple: survive until sunrise. But the longest failed attempt only lasted a few hours, and every previous team had been wiped out before the gate opened again. As night settles in, Junho feels something watching him from the dark. The dungeon is full of undead, but their presence alone does not explain why this beginner gate became a graveyard. The monsters rush him in waves. Zombies ignore pain, shrug off ordinary wounds, and chase living targets without hesitation, which makes them perfect for overwhelming frightened low-level players. Even so, Junho is not a real novice. He cuts through the swarm until exhaustion sets in, then hears a voice from somewhere below the battlefield. A trembling survivor begs for help, claiming everyone else died. Junho listens, asks questions, and calmly tells the voice to scream louder, not out of kindness, but to locate the real body hiding underground. The trick is exposed. The creature had been keeping one life hidden so the gate could never open, baiting player after player into exhaustion while the undead finished the work. Once Junho kills the last hostile monster, Curse of Dawn finally clears. The reward is smaller than he hoped in levels, but the gate gives him something far more useful than a random item. Junho gains Confession of the Dead, a skill that can peer into the memories of the dead. For the first time since waking up, this is power earned not as Specter, but as the new player Seo Junho. After Curse of Dawn falls in a single day, the entire player world starts hunting for the anonymous clear. Deokgu is buried in calls, while Junho quietly enjoys watching the guild's panic. Junho refuses to reveal himself yet. He knows sharp people will connect the pattern soon enough. Whoever cleared one forgotten gate is likely to appear at the next uncleared one. Instead of celebrating, he trains. Each tiny stat increase matters now, because the body he woke up with is still far below the power he once had as Specter. His next target is Luf's Garden, Korea's oldest uncleared gate. 124 parties tried and failed, and even India's genius archer, Tushar Vishi, disappeared inside. That history tells Junho the danger is not ordinary. If a rising star could not clear the gate, he needs to prepare for every possible condition before stepping through. Inside Luf's Garden, the mission is direct. Defeat every monster. The creatures are nocturnal, so Junho holds back and studies the field before the real fight begins. When night arrives, the first Luf's attack. Junho tests the Frost Queen's power in combat and freezes them with ease, proving that his new elemental skill can decide a fight. But the gate immediately shows its teeth. 2 monsters were only bait. The moment he kills them, more shapes gather in the dark and the numbers climb faster than expected. Junho realizes the rule too late for comfort. These monsters multiply when they die. Luf's Garden is not testing whether he can kill them. It is testing whether he can survive the consequences. Luf's Garden turns into exactly the kind of trap Junho expected. Every kill creates more enemies, so the battle becomes a test of stamina, timing, and whether his frost can keep the swarm under control. After hours of fighting, Junho clears the gate, but the result bothers him. If the difficulty was only this high, then Tushar Vishi and his team should have been able to survive. He searches the dead end beyond the maze and finds the remains of previous parties. The gate had not only monsters, but a layout meant to waste time until the wave became impossible to stop. Among the corpses, Junho finds a bow tied to Tushar's legend. With Confession of the Dead, the new skill from Curse of Dawn, he can look into the final memories attached to it. The memory begins in April of 2044. Tushar is asked to help Korea clear Luf's Garden, and despite the danger, he accepts because refusing a desperate request would violate everything he believes in. Tushar does not go alone. Zaya chooses to follow him, not out of glory, but out of trust. Their bond makes the mission feel less like a contract and more like a promise they intend to keep together. The memory then shows what they left behind. Zaya says goodbye to her child, jokes about coming home from a long business trip, and hides the fear that this job may take her away forever. In New Delhi, the team gathers and tries to sound confident. They talk like professionals, but every smile carries weight because everyone knows Luf's Garden has already devoured too many parties. At last, the memory reaches the gate itself. Tushar's group enters Luf's Garden, and Junho is about to learn why a team strong enough to clear it never made it back. Inside Tushar's memory, Luf's Garden first looks manageable. The party scouts the dungeon, sees only a small number of monsters, and believes their preparation may be enough. Then the gate's real rule appears. Every wave grows in number, and when the party realizes the Lufs are doubling, survival stops being a plan and becomes a desperate retreat. Tushar's record turns into a diary of losses. Comrades die from injuries, the sun keeps setting, and each new entry is written like a prayer that there will not be another wave. By the 4th and 5th waves, the team is nearly broken. Tushar can still fight, but victory no longer matters to him if the people he came with will not leave beside him. At the worst moment, the truth is revealed. Ram, one of their own, is a fiend. He betrays the party, poisons Tushar, and demands the Tempest bow after letting everyone else die. Tushar refuses to simply hand over his life. Even poisoned and surrounded, he runs, because if Ram escapes with the truth hidden, every death in the gate will be blamed on the dungeon alone. His final notes are not excuses. Tushar records the poison, the 6th wave, and the awful realization that his friends might have survived if Ram had not sabotaged them from inside. Tushar dies asking that someone condemn the sinners who caused this. Confession of the dead gives Junho not just information, but the last will of a hero who was betrayed. Back in the present, Junho understands why he cleared the gate. The monster count scaled with the number of players, and he entered alone. He takes Tushar's record and borrows the Tempest, promising revenge against the fiends. News of Junho's clear spreads before he can say a word. India thanks him for returning Tushar's diary, and the families finally learn that their loved ones did not simply fail inside the gate. The Tempest bow is a larger problem. It was treated as a national weapon, and Deok-gu panics when he realizes Junho walked out of the gate carrying something everyone believes was lost. Junho sees the real risk differently. The fiend who wanted the bow will not believe it vanished, and another collector, Demon Bow Cal Signer, may come looking once the rumors spread. Deok-gu wants him to pull back, but Junho refuses to live like prey. If the fiends are going to chase him, he would rather choose the battlefield himself. When reporters gather outside the association, Junho changes the situation in one move. Instead of hiding, he tells Deok-gu to let them in and turns public attention into a weapon. The press conference introduces him as the player who cleared Curse of Dawn and Luf's garden back-to-back. He looks casual, but his confidence reminds the sharper observers of someone far more experienced. Junho answers only enough questions to shape the story. He lets the world see a new star, while keeping his old identity and his deeper plans out of reach. Then he reveals his next target, the Eastern Sea Gate. His level is still too low to enter, but the announcement lands exactly as intended, shocking the room and sending a message to anyone watching. The press immediately understands the weight of Junho's answer. The Eastern Sea Gate is Korea's final uncleared gate, and rumors say a boss monster waits inside. Junho acts casual, but his answer is calculated. A boss monster is dangerous, yet he tells the world that if he fights one, he will win. That confidence changes his value overnight. If he clears a third impossible gate, even Korea's top guild leader, Shin Sung-hyan, may personally invite him. Before the Eastern Sea Gate is possible, Junho chooses a different request. A commission from a father searching for the Cinder Fox core that might cure his daughter's terminal illness. The request comes through the Junho group, and Deok-gu assigns Cha Si-yoon as Junho's secretary and guide. The job is no longer only about experience. It is tied to a powerful family. Si-yoon explains the tragedy. Choi Pil-ho's daughter, Hee-sun, suffers from a rare condition, and one known treatment requires the core of a Cinder Fox. The mansion and the names stirred Junho's memory from 25 years ago. He arrives to find Choi Pil-ho himself waiting, desperate enough to greet him in person. Pil-ho does not bargain like a businessman. He takes Junho's hand and bows, asking him to save Hee-sun from the disease that has consumed his family. Choi Pil-ho offers Junho an enormous commission for the Cinder Fox core and promises to supply anything needed for the gate. Junho turns down the premium, not because the job is easy, but because the situation reminds him of the past. When Pil-ho asks why, Junho gives the same reason Specter once gave. A parent should never be charged more just because their child is dying. On the way out, Si-yoon talks about Specter as a distant hero, unaware that she is sitting beside him. Her faith in his old name quietly reminds Junho of the responsibility he still carries. Deok-gu prepares support items for the Cinder Fox raid and shows off 25 years of player technology. Artificial Kai blades, defensive tools, and weapons made from advanced monster materials. Junho is not impressed. To him, gear that replaces struggle can hold players back, because the system rewards people who grow by facing opponents close to their own limits. Then he finds one weapon that feels real. Unlike the flashy toys, this sword has the weight and balance of something worth carrying into a dangerous gate. The Cinder Fox gate is crowded with guilds and players chasing the same core. Si-yoon stays beside Junho, and he calmly asks for another cup of lavender tea when he returns. She tells him to get up earlier than usual tomorrow. The next conquest is about to begin, and Junho steps toward it with the confidence of someone who has already seen far worse. At the Burning Dunes gate, reporters and players crowd around Junho. doubting whether a lightly equipped newcomer can handle a monster known as a disaster. The gate opens into a desert, and Chenghe Guild immediately tries to take command. Cha Minwoo offers money to anyone willing to follow his orders and surrender the Cinder Fox core. Most players accept because the reward sounds safer than fighting alone. Junho refuses the group plan and walks off by himself, which makes the guild dismiss him as reckless. Junho studies the desert instead of chasing the crowd. The Cinder Fox is closer to a mythical creature than a normal monster, and if it completes all 9 tails, it becomes a true boss. Chenghe's party relies on traps, weapons, and formation tactics. At first, the plan looks effective, and the weaker players start believing technology can carry them through the raid. Then the Cinder Fox appears. It has 9 tails, a sign that the creature has already reached the level of legend, and the mood around the raid changes instantly. Cha Minwoo still believes his prepared traps can kill it and even surpass Specter. The fox answers with fire, turning his confidence into the first real warning of the battle. Chenghe's raid collapses almost immediately. Their traps and technology cannot restrain the Cinder Fox, and the players who trusted the guild realize they have no way to hunt it. As panic spreads, Junho steps between the fox and the survivors. Cha Minwoo tells him to move, but Junho has already decided who needs saving first. He understands the other players were doomed from the start. The question is whether the Cinder Fox will be satisfied with them, so he orders the survivors to take the wounded and run. Once the stragglers are gone, Junho finally faces the monster alone. The fight stops being a rescue and becomes a test of how much of Specter's old battle sense remains. The fox keeps him at range with heat and flame. Junho realizes it will not let him close, so he begins looking for a pattern instead of forcing a reckless charge. He tests the opening with frost and sword strikes, cutting through the fire just enough to reach one of the fox's tails. The monster's body reacts the moment the tail is damaged. That is the answer. If a tail is cut, the fox's strength decreases, and Junho now has a real path to killing a creature everyone else treated as impossible. Outside the gate, hours pass while everyone waits for survivors. Inside, the Cinder Fox is finally feeling pain, and Junho realizes this may be the first time the creature has ever been hunted properly. The battle becomes a grind of frost, steel, and fire. Junho keeps stripping away the fox's advantages, forcing the monster into a fight it can no longer control. When the fox finally falls, the gate announces its defeat. Junho has secured the Cinder Fox core, but the effort drains him completely. The gate turns green and the players emerge. Reporters rush the scene, and because Cha Minwoo comes out first, everyone assumes Chenghe led the clear. At first, Minwoo is offered the hero's spotlight, but the moment reminds him of the child he once was, the child who wanted to become a great hero like Specter. Minwoo chooses not to steal the credit. He tells the reporters he will explain what really happened inside the gate, giving Junho the recognition he tried to avoid. Junho wakes in a hospital bed after using every bit of his energy. Instead of resting, he heads straight to meet the real patient, because the core only matters if it can save Hee-sun. Junho meets Hee-sun despite having just fainted inside the gate. Her condition is worse than expected, so there is no room to delay the treatment. The Cinder Fox core is dangerous for ordinary people because of its heat, but Junho knows the method Specter once used. He promises it will not take long and begins. The system reacts unexpectedly. Junho's frost skill can absorb the yin energy inside Hee-sun, turning a cure into both a rescue and a new clue about his own power. The treatment succeeds. Hee-sun will recover without side effects, and the commission ends with Junho doing exactly what Pilho begged him to do. Pilho repays him with something more valuable than a larger fee. The Myungho group promises support whenever Junho needs it, giving him a powerful ally for future moves. Back with Deokgu, Junho explains the bigger discovery. Frost can absorb yin energy, and if it works on illness, it may also work on items or other sources tied to the same force. Deokgu understands the opportunity and agrees to search for suitable items while Junho investigates the player market. His only warning is simple: do not go around causing trouble. Junho visits the player market, a public trading area where gate items are sold openly. But he is not interested in tourist stalls. He is looking for the hidden black market beneath it. The entrance is disguised inside a movie theater, where a special seat acts as a teleport zone. Moments later, Junho arrives in the black market, a place where normal rules do not apply. The market is full of illegal goods and dangerous people, but Junho is not worried. Most truly strong players have gone upward or disappeared, leaving predators who only look impressive from a distance. At an item shop, he senses exactly what he came for: artifacts holding yin and frost energy. When the owner tries to hide the better stock, Junho pressures him into opening the back room. Inside, Junho finds a cursed ice artifact that can raise his magic again once purified. He buys it along with the lesser items, turning the black market into a shortcut for his recovery. Before he leaves, a self-styled senior recognizes him. Blood Blade Kim Chialsu tries to posture as a famous player, but Junho has never heard of him. The gang moves to teach him respect, and Junho sees the real scam. They ambush weaker-looking rookies to raise their tabloid reputation. He invites them to attack, glad for a chance to clean the streets himself. The black market crowd watches Junho square up against the Gangnam trio. They expect a rookie to be crushed, but Junho only cares about the outcome. The trio tries to turn the fight into theater, announcing techniques and flashing weapons. Junho answers with a dagger, treating their bravado like noise. They look for tricks and openings, assuming a new player will freeze once a real killing intent appears. Instead, Junho reads their feints and breaks their formation. For a moment, the fight reminds him why so many fiends once feared Specter. The instincts are still there, and against bullies like this, that is more than enough. Junho wins without needing to kill them. The crowd immediately cheers the result, not because justice was served, but because they enjoy whoever looks strongest. That reaction disgusts him. In this distorted player world, people either join the madness, suppress themselves until they break, or live in constant fear. The black market video spreads almost instantly. Somewhere else, a woman watching the footage notices Junho's skill and asks for his name, turning one street fight into another thread pulling toward him. After the black market fight, Junho tries to slip away before the attention gets worse. The crowd is still pressing in when someone unexpected calls his name. The woman is Gong Juha, the princess of the Dakibai Guild and one of the Big Six's public monsters. Her fire energy is obvious even before she introduces herself. Junho quickly realizes this is a scouting visit. Juha pulls him out of the street and into a cafe, where her confident image immediately gives way to someone who hates heat and just wants something cold. Dakibai's offer is direct. They want Seo Junho. His achievements, his combat sense, and even the rumor that he only has a single low-ranked skill make him more interesting, not less. Juha lays out the benefits: elite teammates, training, money, reputation, and the backing of one of the strongest guilds in Korea. It is exactly the kind of deal most new players would grab without thinking. Junho sees the trap behind the offer. Joining a giant guild would give him resources now, but it would also put a chain around his neck later, and he has no intention of becoming someone else's weapon. Juha accepts the refusal better than expected and leaves him with a warning instead. The fiends are moving again, even on the first floor, and Junho may run into them before he is ready. Back with his own side, Junho explains why he turned Dakibai down. Honor and money are useful, but freedom matters more, and his current contract can still give him room to close the gap. With that settled, Junho chooses his next target, the 7th floor. The schedule is set a week out, but that delay has a purpose. He is laying bait and preparing for whatever bites. The bait works immediately. News spreads that Seo Junho will attempt the Eastern Sea Gate, and the announcement gives his enemies a clear place to watch. On the fiend side, Junho is already a problem. He is tied to the evidence around Tushar Vishi's death, and without proof they cannot move openly, so they send the Shadow Brothers instead. The Eastern Sea Gate also draws another giant, Sword Saint Kim Woo-jung of the 9 Heavens. His presence makes the raid even more dangerous, but it also shows how much attention Junho has gathered. Junho checks whether the bait has been taken and notices the suspicious medic team joining the raid. If the Shadow Brothers are hiding there, Secretary Cha can trace them while Junho keeps preparing. He spends the remaining time training his magic and reading the gate. From the name and reports, he expects a C-type boss, possibly something close to a dragon, the kind of monster beginners should never face directly. Junho weighs his options carefully. If the boss is too strong, he will either control the battlefield or drag the fight somewhere favorable, and he keeps testing whether his recovered power can carry the plan. On raid day, Ilsan Beach is packed with reporters and nervous players. Everyone knows this gate has swallowed hundreds, but Junho stays calm while the world treats it like a public spectacle. The Shadow Brothers' presence confirms his suspicion. The fiends are connected to this raid. Even so, Junho refuses to cancel, because he has already prepared a plan for when they finally make their move. At the Eastern Sea Gate, Junho is treated like the center of the raid. Foreign players greet him, reporters watch from outside, and everyone understands what clearing the last uncleared gate would mean for Korea. Junho is not focused on fame. He thinks like a hunter. Players are most alert when they enter a gate, but that same focus makes them slower to notice attacks from behind. The Shadow Brothers watch for their chance, but the raid environment is stranger than expected. Instead of a normal dungeon path, the gate opens into a quiet island and a sea breeze. That calm does not last. The master of the gate begins to reveal itself, and the party realizes the nameless dragon is far larger and more dangerous than the reports made it sound. While everyone is looking at the monster, Junho disappears from the enemy's senses. He catches one of the hidden attackers and forces the real question into the open. They are working with the fiends. The raid splits into two battles. One side has to keep the dragon busy, while the Shadow Brothers scramble to recover Junho before their failure turns into another disaster like the Las Vegas auction. Their confidence returns when they corner him alone. To them, Junho still looks like a novice who cannot even hide his aura, so they demand he come quietly. Then Junho understands the field around him. The dense trees and darkness should favor a shadow skill, but the aura he feels is not ordinary darkness. Something more ominous is waiting inside the gate. The ambusher thinks Junho is cornered, but Junho has already seen through him. The scarlet eyes give away the truth. Vincent is not just a hidden attacker, he is tied to the fiends. Vincent loses control for a moment, then chooses to fight instead of run. Junho understands what that means. The man is confident enough in this shadowy terrain to risk being exposed. The battle turns into a test of concealment and detection. Vincent disappears into the darkness, but Junho follows the aura, forcing the fiend to keep moving instead of landing a clean strike. Outside that duel, the dragon dominates the raid. It refuses to fly low enough for a normal attack, and the players below can only buy time while searching for a workable opening. The Shadow Brothers regroup and realize Junho tricked them. They have lost their target. The dragon is becoming a bigger problem, and the only path left is to exploit its reverse scale. The attack plan is risky. Use shadow movement to reach the dragon's weak point while the others keep it distracted. The cost is immediate because any damage to the shadow user is carried back to the body. The dragon drops lower and the opening finally appears. For a second, the raid has a chance to strike the reverse scale, but the monster's pressure keeps crushing the battlefield around them. Then the fight twists again. Junho freezes through the chaos and finds the point he was looking for, setting up the next move before the gate can swallow the raid completely. The raid nearly collapses the moment the reverse scale is struck. Junho knows the mistake immediately. Anyone who has never fought a dragon thinks its weak point is simple, but hitting it only drives the monster berserk. The dragon's main attack floods the area with brutal cold, and the other players struggle just to stay alive. Junho does not rush in. He waits, measures the reaction, and prepares the item he kept for this moment. The surviving players realize Junho is their only real chance. Even the fiends understand that if they die here, Junho cannot finish the raid alone, so for a short while everyone is forced onto the same side. Junho turns that chaos into control. While the others are still reacting, he draws the dragon's focus and treats the battlefield like a shooting range, not a disaster. His weapon is the Tempest bow, and it fits his recovered abilities perfectly. The attack lands with enough force that the others finally understand how easily he was holding the fight together. Once the dragon falls, the temporary alliance ends. The fiends try to bargain with information, but Junho has no interest in negotiating with enemies who have already seen too much. He finishes them coldly and leaves them with a final judgment. If there is an afterlife even for people like them, they should spend it repenting. With the dragon fight over, Junho looks over the battlefield and the fallen fiends. The danger is gone for the moment, but what they carried may be more useful than the fight itself. He finally tests the skill gained from the Curse of Dawn, Confession of the Dead. It lets him pull memories from a corpse, and Vincent becomes the first target. The memories play like a film. Junho watches Vincent's recent past, following the fiend trail through orders, fear, and the people who were sent after him. Once Vincent's memories are exhausted, Junho turns his attention to the gate itself. He wants to know what kind of being the nameless dragon truly was before it became a monster. The answer reaches far into the past. The dragon was not simply a beast, but a guardian tied to the land and its people, a forgotten protector twisted into the gate's final enemy. Junho realizes he has killed something connected to Korea's own history, almost like striking down an ancestor. Instead of celebrating, he gives the fallen dragon respect and lets the land rest. The system answers that act with rewards. Junho receives new recognition from the clear, and the Eastern Sea Gate closes with more meaning than anyone outside can see. The clear pays off immediately. Junho levels up and receives a unique item, a reward far better than what he expected from the Eastern Sea Gate. Outside, the public only sees the official version. Junho returns alive, the Shadow Brothers are reported dead, and he claims the maze and the nameless dragon separated the raid from the truth. The fiend side cannot ignore the loss. Their people are dead, their auction connection is exposed, and Junho has survived again while carrying information they cannot easily recover. Back in ordinary life, Junho is pushed into the part of being a famous rookie. He gets managed, styled, and fussed over, realizing that life without Specter's mask comes with different kinds of attention. Secretary Char is thrilled to help him look presentable, and Junho lets himself enjoy it for once. A haircut, an expensive salon, and a brief refresher become a small break from gates and fiends. Afterward, he slips back into an old habit and heads toward a familiar place for food. The city feels different now, but some routines still pull him back. Then the quiet day turns strange. In an ordinary restaurant, Junho unexpectedly runs into Cha Si-yoon, and her shock makes it clear this meeting will not stay simple. Junho and Cha Si-yoon end up sharing an awkward but strangely comfortable break at a manhwa cafe. Both of them try to act serious, but their book choices make the moment feel almost ordinary. After reading, they talk about why Si-yoon likes places like this. She may have been treated as elite, but here she can sit quietly, turn pages, and enjoy being left alone. The quiet does not last. Junho tells Deokgu he is heading to Las Vegas, not for a funeral, but because the dead fiends exposed one of the association's meeting places. Before leaving, he turns the Eastern Sea Gate materials into preparation. Half the dragon bones go to Deokgu, and the rest are sent to Kwon to forge a sword that matches Junho's old style. Junho also reviews the gate rewards. The Flute of Tidal Breath is powerful enough to break after only 3 uses, and the Tidal Helper of Ascension raises the stats he needs most. His magic stat is higher than it has ever been since waking up. Once he learns Sword Aura and keeps building his recovery, he may eventually stand on the same field as the 9 heavens again. That thought makes him look ahead instead of back. The top players have had 25 years to grow, the fiends have changed too, and Junho is excited to see how dangerous the world has become. Junho arrives in Las Vegas, the city that never sleeps. He misses how easy travel would have been with Skaya, but this trip has nothing to do with pleasure or gambling. His trail leads to Jim's Cleaners, a front for a small fiend meeting place. Inside, the local members are already panicking over the Shadow Brothers' failure, and the attention now pointed at them. Junho breaks into the hideout and strips away their confidence fast. They are not masterminds, only couriers and small fry connected to something larger. Under pressure, they mention the Watchdogs, a far more dangerous group tied to massacres and rumors of powerful fiend experiments. That is the lead Junho actually came for. Once the truth is out, Junho handles the rest of the cell without ceremony. They were only delivery men, but the information they carried points straight toward the Las Vegas auction. Because he cannot walk into that auction without an invitation, Junho calls Deokgu in the middle of the night. The next step is not a raid yet. It is getting inside the room where the fiends trade. Junho reaches the hotel where the auction will be held, dressed in the clothes Deokgu sent for him. Before he can even enter, he runs into In-ho from the Dakibai Guild. In-ho is working security for one of the hosts, so he guides Junho through the casino system. After players started abusing ordinary games with enhanced senses, the hotel built a separate floor just for them. There, Junho finds Gong Juha losing badly at a shell game. She is strong enough to be feared as a ranker, but when gambling becomes a battle of eyes and rhythm, she has no talent at all. Junho reads the dealer's movements immediately and keeps picking the correct cup. What looks like beginner's luck is actually his ability to understand the trick behind the movement. Then a masked gambler challenges him. Junho recognizes the chance before him. These are the people he came to find, but he still needs proof before he can move in public. So Junho baits them through the game itself. By staying calm, winning cleanly, and forcing their attention onto him, he turns a casino table into the first trap of the hunt. The masked gambler pushes the shell game harder, but Junho explains the real trick. Do not follow the cup, follow the dealer. Strength does not matter if you understand the essence of the skill. After the game, Junho reveals the ice compass Deokgu lent him. It reacts to a specific kind of magic, and when it points straight at the masked group, the coincidence becomes impossible to ignore. Junho pretends to leave for the bathroom, giving the fiends exactly the opening they want. One of them follows him away from the crowded casino and into a place where no witnesses can interfere. The attacker realizes too late that Junho may have led him there on purpose. He tests Junho's defenses, studies his reactions, and decides the next strike should end the fight. But Junho is reading him just as carefully. The fiend aims for the obvious weakness. Junho anticipates the trap, and the duel turns from ambush into a lesson in who controls the rhythm. The fiend rages when his plan fails, but Junho stays cold. Being too cautious can be just as fatal as rushing in, and this time the hunter is the one being hunted. After Junho takes out the attacker, the watchdogs realize something is wrong. They identify him from Las Vegas player records and from the Shadow Brothers incident, then mark him as a threat. Junho walks into the auction without trouble, surprised when his invitation is treated as VIP authority. Deokgu did more than send clothes and a room. He gave Junho a seat with real weight. Gong Juha catches him before the auction begins, still irritated that he vanished after saying he was going to the bathroom. The tension softens into banter, but Junho keeps his eyes on the room. Inside the hall, Juha realizes Junho's ticket is even better than hers, and assumes he must be Deokgu's chosen proxy. Junho cannot correct her without drawing more attention, so he lets the misunderstanding stand. His real target is not a trophy item. After reading the fiend's memories, Junho knows Arma and the watchdogs are too dangerous for him to handle alone, so he quietly plans to use the Dakibai Guild's strength. The auction finally opens. Everyone sees a glittering artifact sale, but Junho sees the battlefield forming around Heaven's Breath and the enemy hidden among the bidders. The auction begins normally enough, with Gong Juha treating the whole event like entertainment, while Junho stays focused on anything that might connect to the fiends. One strange item catches Junho's attention, an unknown ball no one has been able to identify for years. His keen intuition reacts, so he buys it cheaply despite everyone else dismissing it. Then the real prize appears, a top-grade magic core powerful enough to make nations compete. The price explodes, and Junho watches the room reveal exactly how much influence is gathered here. The auction is shattered when monsters suddenly appear inside the hall. Junho immediately connects the chaos to the fiends and realizes someone may be using a rare summoning skill. Juha takes command at once. Her priority is evacuating the audience, then securing Heaven's Breath, but the crowd jams at the exits and panic threatens to turn the attack into a massacre. So Juha chooses lives over property and smashes a new path through the wall. The auction has become a battlefield, and Junho is already moving toward the enemy behind it. Inside the hall, Juha throws herself between the monsters and the civilians. In-ho is knocked down, but she refuses to let the summons turn the auction into a slaughter. Her power tears through the creatures so brutally that even the enemies watching from a distance understand the problem. Fighting Gong Juha head-on is not part of their plan. Elsewhere, the thieves confirm the real objective. They have secured the item. One of them regrets not killing Junho, only for Junho to appear before that mistake can stay theoretical. The sniper tries to finish Junho with a long-distance teleport shot, but the attack misses. Junho vanishes from the expected line of fire and turns the assassin's certainty into fear. Junho pressures the attacker for answers, while the auction side discovers the worst detail. Heaven's breath has disappeared during the chaos. With the prize stolen and the enemy scattered, the operation is no longer only about survival. Junho now has to recover Heaven's breath before the watchdogs can escape. As Juha holds the auction hall, the clues finally connect. The armor on the attackers and the history of missing players point toward the same organization Junho has been hunting. From the fiend's memories, Junho reconstructs the plan. One side distracts Gong Juha, another steals Heaven's breath, and Arma stays away from the site behind layers of magic traps. Charging at Arma would be suicide, so Junho chooses the cleaner route. He tracks the thief carrying the item and notices the watchdogs are confused by an unexpected third party on the field. The thief thinks the top-grade magic core will give him an advantage, but the core itself is a trap. Junho lets the enemy waste power and timing before cutting into the opening. The skeleton mage demands Junho's name, but Junho does not waste respect on people who turned players and orphans into disposable tools. He ends the fight and takes back what they stole. When the summons collapse, Juha realizes the mage has been removed from the board. The disaster is over for now, but the watchdogs have given Junho a much darker target. From the captured memories, Junho learns the watchdogs are worse than ordinary fiends. They raise orphans as tools, discard failures, and treat children as raw material for their organization. Back at the hotel, Juha is furious that Heaven's breath vanished before she could track the thief. Then a package arrives from an anonymous fan, and inside is the real item she thought was gone. The note claims the fan happened to deal with the skeleton mage in passing. Juha wants to find the person, but the work is too clean, and Junho quietly lets the mystery protect his identity. When Junho meets Juha again, she scolds him for vanishing during the crisis. She believes players should protect people, while Junho carefully dodges the fact that he was the one handling the threat from the shadows. Before leaving, Junho collects his auction items and confirms he will return to Korea. Juha asks again if he will join her guild, then turns the answer into a wager. Reach the second floor within half a year. Junho still does not know why keen intuition reacted to the unknown ball, but he keeps it. Then a delivery from the floor arrives with a message from Arthur, proving his old allies are starting to move. Junho returns to Korea and is met by Secretary Cha, who quietly looks after the details Deokgu has piled onto him. Even her gift, a rare book he wanted, shows how carefully she pays attention. Back with Deokgu, Junho passes on what he learned about the fiends using orphans as tools. Deokgu is furious, but for Junho the answer is simple. He will start doing what he can now. The timing lines up with another old promise. Kwon Noya has finished the sword Junho requested before leaving for Las Vegas, so Junho heads to the workshop the next morning. The reunion is rough on the surface and warm underneath. Noya's grandson is shocked by how casually Junho speaks to the old master, but their bond goes back to the days when Junho was Specter. Noya acts gruff, but he is relieved Junho survived and returned. Their banter cannot hide the weight of 25 missing years, or the fact that Junho came back carrying something impossible. When Noya sees the Frost Queen's power, the mood changes. The old blacksmith understands at once that Junho's return is not ordinary, and that this skill may decide what comes next. Junho explains that the Frost Queen's power came from a contract tied to saving his old companions. Noya pushes past the shock with familiar bluntness, then brings out the sword he forged from the nameless dragon's bones. The blade fits Junho perfectly. It carries Noya's old promise and 25 years of improved skill, and Junho recognizes that the gruff craftsman never stopped thinking about him. Their reunion turns competitive over a board game and a rare tea. Noya only explains the tea after losing, revealing that it came from leaves grown by elves on the second floor. That opens the bigger subject. The second races, intelligent beings like orcs and elves. Noya knows more than he should because an elder of the elf tribe once came down from the floor in secret. When Junho shows him the unknown ball, Noya identifies it as an elven item. If it carries energy from the world tree, then Junho may need contact with elves to learn its real purpose. Secretary Cha finds the lead. Dark elves have appeared in England's wild forest gate. The gate will draw major guilds from around the world, giving Junho a new hunt and a possible path to the elven clue. Far from Korea, the watchdogs report the Las Vegas failure. Arma learns his people are dead, the skeleton mage is gone, and Seo Junho may be responsible for disrupting the operation. The name reaches someone even more dangerous. Cal Siner, tied to the dead disciple, gives his subordinate half a year to bring Junho to the second floor, even if that means finding a way around the elevator's rules. Meanwhile, Junho prepares for the Wild Forest Gate. Because the gate allows 200 players, its difficulty is expected to be severe, and protecting everyone inside may be harder than any simple hunt. Players from around the world gather in England. Junho is recognized by people from the Cinder Fox incident, including Cha Si-yoon, who wants to show how much she has changed since that battle. Cha approaches Junho directly, thanks him for carrying her out alive, and then makes her real offer. She wants to know whether he is currently in a party. Junho accepts the Chenghi Guild party offer because it gives him a practical route through the Wild Forest Gate. The goal is still the same: find the Dark Elves and learn what they know. Inside the gate, Junho is reminded how much the world changed while he slept. Modern parties use terminals to build magic communication networks instead of old-fashioned strategy meetings. Cha introduces the team, including Seo Murray, whose preview skill can glimpse what lies ahead. Her vision says Junho will take down 10 Dark Elves, which is enough to sharpen everyone's focus. As the guilds spread out, something feels wrong. No one has found the Dark Elves, the enemy numbers seem too low for a 200-player gate, and Murray's clue points to night. Junho predicts a night raid, but the others struggle to believe Dark Elves would organize so boldly. Their confidence comes from old assumptions, while Junho reads the absence of movement as preparation. When the sun sets, the Dark Elves appear closer than expected and show no fear of fire. Junho's warning becomes urgent. Wake everyone now because the surprise attack has already begun. The warning comes just in time. Updates from the night watch stop, Junho's senses sharpen, and he confirms that the Dark Elves and their wold dogs have already reached the camp. Junho cuts through the first wave without wasting Noya's new sword on Small Fry. He even lets one enemy run so he can chase it back toward the force controlling the raid. By the time he returns, the Chenghi camp has survived, but other parties are still isolated. Junho understands the enemy plan now. Divide the players, break them one camp at a time, and leave no one organized enough to counterattack. He reaches the Blue Whale party before it collapses completely. Some players are already dead, but Junho's arrival keeps the survivors from being erased. Junho pushes the survivors through their grief and gives them a job: rally the scattered players to the north. If the Dark Elves are allowed to keep dividing the field, every sacrifice tonight will be wasted. The cost of the raid is everywhere. Poisoned arrows have left players dying, and the survivors understand that many of them are alive only because Junho reached their camps in time. At the morning meeting, the players count about 150 survivors. The Dark Elves lost heavily too, but one wounded party member needs treatment that only a hospital outside the gate can provide. Junho argues for clearing the gate as quickly as possible, not out of sentiment, but because the enemy has a commander. If the players wait, the Dark Elves will reorganize and drag the fight into poison, hunger, and exhaustion. He points out that the wold dogs chasing survivors were pups, meaning the adult forces were already spent in the raid. The Dark Elves cannot repeat that attack at full strength, but they can still bleed the players slowly. Junho takes Seo Murray aside and asks her to use her preview skill. She sees the lair, the tribe chief, and 5 better-armored dark elves beside him. The next move is no longer defense. It is a strike on the enemy's center. The guild leaders accept the plan. With the lair discovered and the tribe chief still gathering forces, all 147 combat-ready players move before the Dark Elves can regroup. They reach the Dark Elves' Valley, a hidden place shaped by the curse of the World Tree. The chief has sealed the usual maze of entrances into a single passage, removing flanking routes for both sides. The players push into a cavern large enough to become the decisive battlefield. Junho keeps the mood sharp by mentioning elixirs, reminding everyone that victory may bring more than survival. Once the fight begins, Junho cuts forward faster than the others can process. Cha realizes she still cannot stand beside his pace yet, but the gap becomes a goal rather than a defeat. At the front, Junho meets the Dark Elven Knights. These are not the small enemies from the night raid, so he answers them with a proper weapon, Noya's Black Dragon Fang. The Dark Elven Knights prove why they once protected the forest. Their swordplay is fast, disciplined, and heavy enough that one clean hit could kill Junho. Junho turns the danger into momentum. He tests their limits, pulls them out of position, and keeps the overall assault moving so the player army does not stall in the cavern. The others finally see what he is doing. Junho is not merely fighting the knights. He is dragging them through the center so the players can crush the dark elves around them. Once the knights are worn down, Junho sends them off cleanly. It is a harsh mercy for warriors who have already lost the pride and reason they once had. The tribe chief can no longer stand by. He mourns what the dark elves became, rejects any mention of elves, and steps forward against Junho himself, turning the raid into a duel. The tribe chief's technique is unlike the knight's sword play. It was built for his corrupted body, and Junho has to adjust quickly as the duel becomes faster and more brutal. The chief believes the only way to restore his people is to defeat powerful prey and reclaim their former glory. Junho rejects that logic, but the chief's conviction gives his attacks terrifying force. Junho recognizes the power he saw in Murray's preview. Black Dragon Fang keeps him alive, but he cannot maintain the exchange forever while protecting the battle behind him. A heavy hit breaks Junho's ribs. For the first time in the raid, the surrounding players see the person carrying the battlefield forced down and hurt in front of them. Instead of retreating, the players step in. They know Junho cut through the elite guards and pushed back the chief for them, so now their job is simple: buy him enough time to recover. Junho asks the others for 10 minutes, and they answer by putting their lives on the line. They know they cannot beat the tribe chief together, but if they can hold him off, Junho might. The line almost breaks. The chief is a boss monster in every sense, and the players survive by inches until Junho rises again and tells them to leave the final fight to him. Junho cannot reveal every card in front of the raid team, so he lets them believe the chief trapped him in a strange private space. In reality, it gives him exactly the cover he needs. Inside that isolated field, the tribe chief realizes Junho has been hiding his true power. Junho answers with the frost skill, freezing the arena and showing that the fight has entered its last phase. Before the raid, Junho had already begun testing the frost skill. He divided it into practical uses: freezing terrain, reinforcing his body and armor, and coating weapons to save mana. That training becomes the answer to the chief's corrupted spirit power. Junho cannot produce true sword aura yet, but by channeling magic through frost and steel, he creates a blade that can still cut through the gap. The tribe chief recognizes the technique's worth and responds with everything he has. Junho gives him the 5 minutes he asked for, then prepares to end it in one strike. Before killing him, Junho asks about the unknown ball. The chief identifies it as a spirit egg and explains that a spirit can be born where energy gathers, giving Junho the answer he came to the gate for. As the chief falls, another threat moves elsewhere. Someone breaks into a guarded place with overwhelming force, a reminder that while Junho won this battle, stronger enemies are already circling. The system confirms the Dark Elf Chief's defeat, but Junho is focused on the spirit egg. If the egg responds to his magic, then the reward from this gate may be far stranger than any ordinary item. Outside the chief's chamber, the remaining players wait anxiously until the gate clears. Junho returns as the obvious MVP, but his grim expression tells them the final fight took more out of him than they can see. On the flight home, the spirit finally reveals herself as the Frost Queen. Junho is less thrilled than anyone would expect, because she is also the monster who froze him and his companions. Their argument turns into a strange accounting of blame. The Frost Queen insists she was not the one who created Junho's frozen fate, and for the first time he hears enough truth in her words to keep listening. The contract forms on one condition: she must never harm the people around him. The Frost Queen accepts, not as a servant, but as a spirit whose pride now has to coexist with Junho's mission. Junho tests his Las Vegas and wild forest gains in the training room. The new artifacts push his magic stat past a key threshold, but he still needs to understand what the Frost Queen can actually do. The Frost Queen refuses to spend her power casually, then demands a tour of the human world instead. For an ancient monarch, the city outside the training room is more confusing than any battlefield. She questions buildings, phones, and even cats with the same royal seriousness. Junho quickly learns that the spirit is powerful, proud, and completely unprepared for modern life. Back in training, she finally shows enough power to prove her value, but Junho wants more than raw force. He needs something he cannot make himself, a technique or tool that changes how he fights. The answer begins to appear. The Frost Queen can create exactly the kind of impossible ice form Junho was looking for, and his training starts to draw serious attention. Junho reveals the Frost Queen to Deokgu, who reacts about as badly as expected. Once the shock settles, he explains the spirit egg, the contract, and why her power could become a major advantage. Junho chooses his next target, Winter Castle, a gate tied to his frozen past. Deokgu worries about trauma, but Junho points out that the source of that trauma is standing right beside him. He questions the Frost Queen about the system itself. Her memories have been erased, but she can still help him with places and beings connected to the land, which may become useful later. The contract has a cost. When a spirit uses power, it drains the contractor's mental strength. Junho accepts the trade-off and gives himself 2 weeks to change how he uses frost. The next public step is another press conference. Secretary Cha prepares Junho properly this time, making sure the player who keeps shaking the world does not walk out in pajamas. Junho's press conference draws a crowd far larger than his last one. The world now sees him beside names like Kim Woo-jung, and everyone expects his next move to be reckless. He confirms that he is planning to enter the Cave of Trials. The gate is famous because no one can explain what happens inside, and every clear lets a player choose whether to continue or give up. Junho knows the cave from his past life, but his reset may let him challenge it again. He wants the trials not for attention, but to surpass his former self and reach the companions still frozen ahead of him. Afterward, he asks the Frost Queen to help with training. She treats the request like a monarch taking on a disciple, and Junho accepts the difficulty because that is exactly what he needs. Junho's training is brutal enough to leave him gasping. The Frost Queen is not simply teaching him to make ice. She is forcing him to understand frost as a complete combat style. Half a month earlier, she explained the foundation. Frost is not just cold, and in the right hands its users were once called one-man armies because they could shape the battlefield by themselves. Her first lesson is maddeningly precise: recreate her sword in ice. Junho wants techniques, but she makes him repeat form, edge, weight, and balance until his control starts catching up to his talent. After days of failures, one blade finally passes. The Frost Queen admits his progress is impressive, and in her own prideful way, she begins to enjoy watching him become strong enough to protect what matters. Then Junho travels to Tibet for the Cave of Trials. At the entrance, he sees the record of those who cleared it before and steps forward, ready to test this new frost training against the system itself. Inside the Cave of Trials, Junho meets Gray, the administrator of Earth's floor. Gray recognizes both Specter and the Frost Queen, but the real issue is whether Junho is allowed to challenge a gate he cleared long ago. Junho argues that because his old rewards and stats were reset, the attempt should count. Gray worries that prior knowledge makes the trial unfair, so Junho accepts the obvious solution: raise the difficulty. The first stages begin immediately. Junho returns to the humid cave, clears the magic trial, and keeps choosing to go forward without rest, even as Gray's adjusted difficulty starts showing its teeth. The body trial strips him down to raw endurance. Every step hurts, but Junho refuses to quit because each level is another chance to rebuild the strength he needs for his frozen companions. Then the phantom trial begins. Junho expects illusions, but the cave chooses the worst possible shape for them: the friends he lost, standing in front of him as enemies. The illusion tries to make Junho hesitate by wearing his friends' faces. He knows they are fake, but hearing those final memories twisted into an insult still cuts deeper than any monster. Junho and the Frost Queen pick apart the first matchup. Skaya's ranged magic and Gilberto's support are dangerous together, so he uses frost to pin them just long enough to create a clean opening. The illusion of Gilberto is still lethal. One real hit could end the trial, so Junho relies on night walking and timing rather than pride, slipping through the shot and ending the exchange. Next comes the high blade. Junho cannot treat the fight like a memory or a reunion. He has to defeat the shape of someone precious without letting the cave decide what those bonds meant. The phantom trial keeps escalating. Junho has to face combinations that would have been terrifying even in the past, because the cave understands how strong his old companions were together. Ramadat's illusion is a different problem entirely. Regeneration makes ordinary tactics useless, so Junho stops trying to win cleanly and instead turns the fight into one decisive opening. The trial saves the cruelest image for last. Junho has to spend the rest of his strength against a berserk illusion, knowing that if this were the real person, his heart would never let him move the same way. He clears the phantom trial, but victory feels heavy. Gray offers the choice again, and Junho answers without hesitation. He did not come this far to stop before the rewards that can help save everyone. Junho wakes sooner than expected after fighting the phantom versions of his companions. The Frost Queen notices the emotional damage beneath the exhaustion, and Junho admits the trial hurt because those faces still matter. The fourth level is insomnia. Hours become days as Junho fights the simple need to sleep, using hunger, cold showers, and sheer stubbornness to keep his mind from surrendering. He survives long enough to remember why the ninth level matters. In the past, its reward helped him endure impossible suffering, and this time those rewards may be what lets him save the people still frozen. Junho clears the sense trials one after another, until Gray reveals a terrifying combination: the Void trial and the Time trial together, isolation so complete that even the passing of time disappears. The Frost Queen warns him, but Junho chooses the risk. Alone in the void, he anchors himself to one fact again and again: he is Seo Junho. He has always endured, and he will overcome this too. Inside the void, Junho loses any sense of how long he has been trapped. Doubt creeps in, but when the cave tries to make him run from the same trial he abandoned in the past, he chooses his name instead. He returns after 10 days. His body is lighter, his magic control has changed, and the rewards finally arrive: stronger stats, raised skill ranks, and the title limit breaker. Junho realizes Gray knew exactly how far the adjusted cave could push him. The growth is painful, but if those stat gains continue, he can close the distance to the level he needs. When he exits, the Cave of Trials ranking changes. Seo Junho's name rises to the top, turning the challenge into a public legend almost immediately. Elsewhere, the demon bow arrives at a hidden place tied to the heavenly demon. Children are being gathered for Signer, and the next enemy thread begins while Junho's name spreads. Junho travels to Rome, not to enjoy the praise from clearing the Cave of Trials, but to find and destroy paradise. Diokgu's lead connects the fiend training facility to Milo Tora's and a pattern of missing children. The first day turns up nothing until Junho catches a young pickpocket. Instead of handing the boy over, he buys him food and learns about a runaway family being targeted by people calling themselves priests. The boy explains the promise of paradise: school, clean clothes, and 3 meals a day if the children become pure. Junho hears the manipulation immediately and asks to be led to the place when the priests return. Before moving, Junho visits the Vatican and meets Pope Francio, one of the people rescued by Spectre long ago. Francio has no direct proof, but both men understand that fiends are likely hiding behind the church's name. Junho spends the day with Marco, the runaway boy who protects his small family. Marco dreams of becoming strong enough to guard them, which is exactly why Paradise's promise is so dangerous. On the way, Marco recognizes Anna, a girl who supposedly went to Paradise months earlier. Her handler looks harmless, but the timing and Tora's sightings tell Junho that this is the path he has been waiting for. Junho plays the part of a tourist looking for a lost brother. The lie works because the handler wants to control the risk, so he invites Junho inside instead of letting him leave. Paradise looks like a clean school and dormitory, but its purpose is training children who want to become players. When Junho is asked to teach them, the trap closes in exactly the direction he wanted. The disguise ends when Junho sees the children's red eyes. Paradise has been feeding them demon blood, turning desperate runaways into future fiends under the cover of salvation. Marco realizes his friends were dragged into this because he trusted the promise. Even then, his faith in Spectre remains, and Junho finally lets that faith meet the man behind the mask. The fiends mock the idea that Spectre has returned, so Junho answers in the simplest way possible. He reveals the darkness skill and cuts through the room before they can understand how badly they misread him. The survivors panic and try to buy time for the demon bow, but Junho is stronger than he was 25 years ago and sharper after the Cave of Trials. Paradise's first line of defense collapses in front of the children. The fiends try to use the children as shields, but Junho refuses to let their fear control the room. Paradise's guards fall one after another before the demon bow can arrive. Junho questions the director through confession of the dead. The memories show a man who wanted power and revenge badly enough to become part of a system that consumed children. The real architect is Chef Roxanne Adjir, a fiend who treats skills and children like ingredients. Paradise has existed for 24 years, but even after all that suffering, it produced only a handful of first-rate results. The purpose was never simple recruitment. Paradise was created because Spectre terrified the fiends so badly that they tried to manufacture a second watchguard of darkness from children who had been turned into fiends. The truth hits Junho harder than the fight. Paradise exploited children for decades because the fiends feared him, and even though he knows the blame belongs to them, he cannot stop feeling responsible. The children begin waking, but they are not safe. Demon blood has already changed them, and the horrible rule is clear. A human who becomes a fiend can never fully return to being human. Their instincts start twisting toward violence. Junho understands why fiends are feared and why the world treats them as enemies, but knowing the reason does not make the children any less tragic. Marco asks to be the one to end it because he was the one who led them to Paradise. Junho refuses to let a child carry that burden so soon, and instead tells him that his compassion is what will make him a great player. Elsewhere, the demon bow wakes in a fury after being delayed. When he reaches the lecture hall, the fiends are gone, and the scene before him makes it clear that Spectre has already struck Paradise's heart. At the Vatican, every rescued child is examined, and the impossible report comes back. None of them are full fiends. The church takes responsibility for them, giving Marco and the others a future Paradise tried to steal. The demon bow can only rage after the fact. Paradise is ruined, the children are gone, and the enemy now links Spectre's return directly to Seo Junho. When Junho returns to Korea, the crowd is overwhelming. Hundreds of thousands gather not for Seo Junho the rookie, but for Spectre, the hero they thought was lost forever. Junho had hoped the peaceful world no longer needed him, but Rome proved otherwise. He admits he is not as strong as he once was, yet refuses to look away, and tells Diakgu to raise the signal as high as possible. The press conference begins with guild leaders, reporters, and high-ranking players watching. When someone asks Junho to prove he is truly Spectre, he answers with the aura no imitation could fake. Junho explains why retirement is no longer enough. Nearly 6,000 children were kidnapped and killed by fiends while the world looked elsewhere, and Rome is only the incident that finally became visible. After the declaration, life at home becomes strangely ordinary again. The Frost Queen discovers television dramas and modern drinks, turning Junho's house into another training ground for patience. Junho's level and magic stat have risen sharply since the Cave of Trials and Paradise. That means he can finally start reviving techniques from his specter days, just as Deok-gu calls with the next problem. Junho's new fame immediately attracts the Big Six. They are not only reacting to Specter's return, they want Seo Junho, the rookie who topped the Cave of Trials. Deok-gu turns the recruitment rush into leverage. Junho cannot join any guild because Specter has already chosen him as an official representative, and any guild that wants access must accept Specter's conditions. The guilds realize they were played, but the excuse is too strong to break. Even Gong Juha appears, less interested in recruitment than in asking Junho for Specter's autograph. Behind the comedy, Junho measures the real problem. The moment he reaches the floor again, he will start near the bottom, so he has to make his current magic and old skills work before he climbs. Junho trains to recover skills from his Specter days, focusing on how he releases magic. Continuous output wastes too much, so he works on momentary output that activates only at the instant of attack. The technique demands magic control, mental power, and physical processing speed at once. Even as Specter, he could only sustain it briefly, but now he needs a field-ready version before Winter Castle. Junho calls Secretary Cha and heads for Antarctica. The cold is brutal enough to overwhelm ordinary preparation, but for him and the Frost Queen, it is the right place to test how far his new power can go. Inside Winter Castle, Junho finds a frozen kingdom instead of a simple gate. The Frost Queen recognizes it as her country, turning the mission into a return to the world she once ruled. The Frost Queen calls Winter Castle her domain, but even she does not understand why it has become a gate. Her memories point back to the Queen's nest, and to knights who were never fully seen on the first floor. She warns Junho about Sir Kiss Bremen, one of the strongest knights tied to the castle. Her vague estimates do not help much, but they make one thing clear. This will not be a simple cold-weather gate. The throne room reveals the real structure of the trial. To prove knighthood, Junho has to cross the castle, defeat around 100 knights, and then face their commander. The knights do not feel alive, but they still obey their purpose. Junho accepts the role the Frost Queen gives him and steps forward to prove himself in the language this frozen kingdom understands. 3 months pass inside the gate. Junho keeps fighting the castle's knights, and every duel teaches him that their weapon auras are more varied and personal than the player system's version. Frost Queen explains the difference. Players pour magic into a weapon like filling a bottle, but Niflheim's knights shaped aura through lifelong discipline and weapons that suited them. Junho makes that his goal: create a new sword aura instead of copying the old one. When the final battles begin, the knights can see how much he has changed since entering the castle. The Wandering Knight acknowledges Junho's proof and gives him a token before Sir Kiss Bremen appears. The commander is finally here, and the pressure alone tells Junho this fight is on another level. Kiss Bremen lives up to the Frost Queen's warning. His bloodlust and technique are so sharp that Junho has to open with booster, and still cannot afford to treat the fight as a test. The gap in weapon quality becomes obvious. Kiss's Ashen Mist controls the battlefield, and Junho realizes that if he keeps burning booster while confused, time will run out before he finds a clean answer. Kiss attacks from inside the mist, forcing Junho into the worst possible position. A stronger opponent, better terrain, and a fog that hides both movement and intent. Junho changes the rules by thinking through the mist itself. If mist is water suspended in air, then frost can turn the enemy's cover into ice, and Kiss Bremen's own field becomes a trap. Junho clears the proof of knighthood and earns another stat increase from Limit Breaker. The Frost Queen hears her knight calling, but her guilt keeps her from facing what remains of her kingdom. Before the gate closes, Junho chooses a new weapon reward and notices a portrait tied to the Frost Queen's past. Winter Castle ends, but it leaves more history behind than answers. When Junho returns, 3 months have passed outside. The public mood has shifted. Commissions are being canceled, and people who praised him are already questioning whether he belongs with them. Secretary Cha worries that the change will hurt him, but Junho is blunt about his reason for fighting. He is not a saint doing everything for others. He fights because his own goals demand it. Then Deok-gu receives a message from Shin Sung-hyan on the floor. Specter has asked the major groups to send every usable public record below mid-level, and Deok-gu chooses to support the people working with him. The Big Six deliver exactly what Junho wanted. By using their own recruitment schemes against them, he gains a mountain of floor intelligence that money alone could never buy. As Junho studies Frontier, Cha Si-yoon brings him her resignation. Working beside him helped her remember the path she wanted for herself, and she returns the ring with the promise to reclaim it when he comes back. Deok-gu is frustrated by how far the Big Six still are on the floor, but Junho sees motivation rather than defeat. The gap is large, yet the association has already done more for him than he could have asked. With 1 week left before he climbs to the floor, Junho thanks Deok-gu for the identity, gear, and support that made this return possible. The next step is no longer preparation. It is departure. In India, a grieving family tries to keep living after loss. The quiet scene matters because the next threat is not only aimed at Junho, it is willing to use innocent people anywhere. Before leaving, Junho receives Arthur's home address and learns it is tied to Gilberto's son. He has to decide whether to approach as Specter or as Seo Junho, because the past keeps reaching forward. A late meal turns into a confrontation when Junho senses a high-level player watching him. The man is not hiding his strength, only choosing a crowded place where Junho cannot act freely. The demon Bo reveals himself at close range. He knows Junho, knows Cal Siner, and threatens everyone nearby if Junho refuses to play along, turning the public street into a hostage field. The demon Bo offers Junho 2 choices: wear restraints and follow, or lose his legs. Junho chooses a third path instead, pulling the fight toward open mountains where civilians cannot be used against him. The demon Bo realizes he underestimated the rookie who cleared Winter Castle alone. His arrows fill the area with overwhelming magic, turning the battlefield into an ocean that slows every movement. Junho is hunted inside that pressure, but the fight also sharpens the demon Bo's senses. He stops treating Junho like prey and prepares to crush him as a future threat to the 9 heavens. Then the atmosphere changes. Junho's magic settles into the eye of the storm, cold and controlled, and the demon Bo recognizes the frost skill as something dangerous enough that he may not be able to leave Junho alive. The demon Bo decides to force Junho's true identity out with one overwhelming barrage. Junho waits for the moment the enemy believes the rain of arrows has already won. Junho cuts through the opening and studies the demon Bo's regeneration. The ability points to undiluted demon blood, the rare path that produces fiends with unique powers. The demon Bo keeps taunting him, but Junho's exhaustion does not stop his blade. He slices apart arrows and pressure alike, fighting past the limit the enemy thought he had reached. At last, the demon Bo understands. Seo Junho is Specter, the enemy of all fiends, hiding in plain sight. Junho refuses to confirm it for the world because some truths do not need an audience yet. After the fight, Junho pulls what he can from the demon Bo's memories. The information confirms leads about Schumann on the floor, but Confession of the Dead still cannot show him everything he wants. Before Junho can leave cleanly, Kim Woo-jung catches the trail. He follows the scent of fiend energy and trace incense, determined not to let Cal Siner escape again. Junho chooses the only workable lie and accepts the consequences. When Woo-jung sees the aftermath, he offers an elixir for the injury and treats Junho's choice as something he would have done too. Woo-jung still sees too much. He cannot believe a low-level player beat the demon Bo alone, so Junho reveals enough of his ability to explain the result while making clear the fiends must never learn the truth. They reach an agreement. Officially, Seo Junho defeated Cal Siner here. The cover keeps Specter's identity protected a little longer, but it also ties Junho to an even larger story. Junho comes home exhausted, but the Frost Queen can tell the fight changed his perspective. Cal Siner and Kim Woo-jung showed him how wide the world still is beyond Earth. For the first time since waking, Junho fully feels the scale of the 9 heavens and the frontier's strongest players. One of Cal Siner's masters is still waiting above, so he decides to work even harder before leaving. Elsewhere, Kim Woo-jung is questioned by Silent Moon's son Ki-won. His mission was not merely to catch Siner, but to retrieve the Demon Bow's weapon, Final Horizon. Woo-jung hides the truth behind Junho's public victory. Ki-won sees through him anyway, and the missing Final Horizon becomes the next unresolved piece tied to the future. Before leaving, Junho visits the frozen companions who started this entire journey. The Frost Queen cannot fully answer whether they are alive, but Junho accepts that seeing them again properly will have to wait until he climbs higher. He says his goodbyes to Deok-gu and Noya, then reaches the artificial island in the Pacific that connects Earth to the floor. The scale is smaller than expected, but the weight of the crossing is not. Officials brief him before departure. He will arrive in Ruben Empire territory, and on the floor he must always stay on guard. The elevator opens like a wall, becoming a gate. Junho steps into Frontier and immediately feels the richer magic in the air. To everyone else, he looks like a new arrival, but the scouts recognize the name at once, and Gong Juha stakes her claim on Mr. Snakehead before anyone else can.